Welcome back, everyone, to That 90s Pod. You know, we love to go deep on the stuff that mattered, and this week we're tackling a film that really hit a nerve back in the day. American Beauty. Think late 90s, suburbia, you know, the image, right? Everything's perfect on the surface, but like underneath, well, things are definitely not what they seem.
It's like that classic American dream gone kind of sour. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, we're all supposed to be happy with the house, the job, the 2.5 kids, but American Beauty just ripped the lid off that and asked some seriously uncomfortable questions. And honestly, I think that's why it's stuck with us all these years later.
It's definitely a film that stays with you.
For sure. So before we get too deep into this, quick reminder to our listeners, if you're digging this deep dive, hit that subscribe button and tell a friend about That 90s Pod. We're all about unpacking the stuff that shaped the decade, the movies, the music, the moments that still make us think. Okay, so American Beauty. Where do we even begin? Let's talk about Lester Burnham, our main guy, stuck in a midlife crisis of epic proportions.
Oh, he's so lost, right?
Right. I mean, he hates his job. His marriage is basically dead. And he's just craving something real, something to make him feel alive again.
And that's where the film really gets interesting because it takes that classic American dream, you know, work hard, get the stuff, be happy, and flips it completely. It's like American Beauty is saying, what if achieving all that leaves you feeling totally empty?
Yeah, it's like the film holds a mirror up to society
Yeah.
and is like, hey, look what we've become. And it came out at a time when, even with all the economic boom and everything, people were starting to feel this like underlying anxiety about it all.
There was definitely a shift happening in the late 90s. Like people were questioning those traditional values, wondering if there wasn't something more to life than just keeping up with the Joneses.
It's like American Beauty just tapped into that collective unease.
Right, that feeling like maybe chasing the perfect life is actually making us all miserable. And that's why it hit such a nerve, I think.
Totally.
Yeah.
And it didn't shy away from the tough stuff either. You know, American Beauty dealt with mental health, sexuality, the search for personal fulfillment, all these things that people were maybe whispering about but weren't really talking about openly.
It definitely pushed some buttons.
It did, but in a way that felt so real, so relatable. It gave a voice to people who felt lost, disillusioned, maybe even a little rebellious.
You know, when I think about American Beauty, there are certain images that just pop into my head. The floating rose petals, for example.
Oh yeah, those are so iconic.
They're beautiful, but there's something kind of unsettling about them too, right? Like they represent this idealized beauty, but at the same time, there's a darkness there, this sense of decay and impermanence.
It's like the whole film is about that duality. You know, it makes you question what we even consider beautiful and why. Is it just surface level stuff, or is there something deeper, more meaningful?
And then you have Carolyn, Lester's wife. She's completely obsessed with appearances, with maintaining this image of the perfect wife and the successful real estate agent.
But underneath it all, she's clearly miserable. It's like she's bought into this idea of what a woman should be, but it's eating her alive.
And that really speaks to the pressures women were facing in the 90s, that whole have-it-all mentality.
Right, like they were supposed to be successful in their careers, perfect mothers, perfect wives, and all of it while looking amazing, of course.
American Beauty didn't shy away from those complexities. It showed how women were navigating these shifting roles, trying to carve out their own paths and figure out what success and fulfillment actually meant for them.
It's interesting to think about how those themes still resonate today, even though the world has changed so much since the late 90s.
Yeah, with social media and everything, the pressure to conform, to achieve this like impossible ideal, it feels even more intense now.
Definitely. But we'll dive into that more in a bit. First, a quick word from our sponsors. And don't forget to subscribe and tell a friend about That 90s Pod. We'll be right back with more on American Beauty.
Okay, so we were talking about the pressures on women, but we have to talk about the music too. Can we just take a minute to appreciate Thomas Newman's score? It's like instantly recognizable, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's so evocative. Like those piano melodies just, I don't know, they get right under your skin. They just totally capture that whole mood of the film, that sense of longing, that search for something more.
It's crazy how music can do that, right? Like tap into something so deep, so emotional without even using words. And Newman just nailed it with this score. There's a real bittersweet beauty to it, this underlying melancholy. It's perfect for American Beauty.
You know, it's funny. It's become so influential. You hear those same melodies all the time now in other movies, TV shows. It's almost like a shortcut to create that same feeling of like unease or yearning, you know?
Yeah, for sure. It's like its own language now.
And speaking of things that are hard to talk about, we
Yeah.
can't really gloss over the controversy surrounding American Beauty. Specifically, Lester's whole thing with Angela, his daughter's friend. That's some heavy stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely the most challenging aspect of the film, and it's something that people still debate, even today. I mean, it makes a lot of viewers uncomfortable, and for good reason.
It definitely forces you to confront some uncomfortable truths about desire and, the complexities of human behavior.
Right. It's not about condoning or condemning anything. It's about understanding, or at least trying to.
And Alan Ball, the guy who wrote it, he's never been one to shy away from tough topics. Like, look at 6 Feet Under and True Blood. Both those shows really push the boundaries of what you could show on TV.
He's definitely drawn to the darker side of human nature, the stuff we usually try to keep hidden.
And yet, he manages to present these flawed characters with so much honesty and empathy. Like, they might do things we find reprehensible, but you still kind of understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, there's a real humanity to his characters, even in their messing up big time.
It's like he's saying, look, this is what it means to be human. We're all a mess, we make mistakes, and that's okay.
It's a really powerful message, especially in a world that's constantly telling us to be perfect.
Totally. Like a reminder that things aren't always black and white, there are all these shades of gray.
Speaking of interesting backstories, did you know that Alan Ball actually wrote American Beauty while he was working as a waiter?
Seriously, I never knew that.
Yeah. Apparently he was going through some kind of personal crisis at the time, which makes sense given how the film deals with those feelings of disillusionment and searching for meaning.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. The writing feels so raw, so honest. Like it came from a place of deep personal experience.
And it clearly resonated with audiences. The film cleaned up at the Oscars, winning like Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Kevin Spacey. I mean, come on.
It's amazing how some films just capture a moment, And American Beauty was definitely one of those films. It sparked so many conversations, and it's still being analyzed and debated today.
And honestly, I think it's more relevant now than ever.
Absolutely. But before we get into that, quick reminder to our listeners. If you're enjoying this trip back to the 90s, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. And hey, tell a friend about that 90s pod. We love having you along for the ride.
So we've talked about a lot, but why do we still care about American Beauty? Why are we still talking about it all these years later? What is it about this film that just keeps people coming back?
It's got to be those themes, right? The whole search for meaning, the struggle to be real, to be yourself, all that pressure to just fit in, that stuff never really goes away.
And in some ways, those themes are even more relevant now, don't you think? Like with social media and everything, it's like everyone's putting on this show trying to project this perfect life.
Oh, totally. It makes it even harder to figure out what actually matters.
Yeah.
What real happiness even is.
And that's what American Beauty nails, right? It shows us how chasing after all the wrong things, the external validation, the surface level beauty, how all that can just leave you feeling empty inside.
Like, it's a total wake-up call. Like, hey, maybe it's time to step back and ask ourselves, what do we want? What really matters to us, not what society tells us should matter.
Exactly. And that message is huge, especially for younger people who are trying to figure out who they are, where they fit in. It's like the film is giving them permission to be different, to embrace their weirdness, to go after what makes them happy, even if it's not what everyone else is doing.
It's such a powerful message. Like, you don't have to buy into the hype. You get to decide what beauty means to you, what success looks like, what fulfillment feels like.
So as we wrap up our deep dive on American Beauty, I'd love for you to think about this. How does this film speak to you? What does it say about the things you value, the things you're searching for? What does it say about how you define beauty and meaning and fulfillment in your own life? It's something to think about,
It definitely is. And if this deep dive got you thinking, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tell a friend about that 90s pod. We'll be back next week with another blast from the past. See ya.